Hi. No, Tony, don't get involved. He'll kill you. Claire shrieked, her voice shrill and trembling. I had never heard her like that, so frantic, so desperate to shield this guy, the man she had chosen over me. She was clinging to him, her hands gripping his shirt as if he were her lifeline. Tony, her lover, shot me a defiant smirk, a cruel twist of the lips as though he thought he'd already won. A spark of rage tore through me, making the room feel smaller, darker, like all the air had been sucked out. I had a split second to decide if I'd walk away or show this guy exactly who he was messing with. I chose the latter. Tony's hand balled into a fist, and he swung, arrogant and overconfident. But I was ready. I sidestepped and intercepted, catching his arm in a twist so sharp that the crack echoed through the room. His eyes widened with panic, and his arm went limp as he dropped to the floor, clutching his broken arm and writhing in pain. Claire scrambled to his side, cursing me with all the venom in her voice, her face twisted into an expression I'd never seen before. Gone was the woman I thought I knew, this was someone else entirely. Before I could catch my breath, 2 police officers yanked my arms behind my back. The cold bite of handcuffs snapped me out of the haze, and before I knew it, they were dragging me out the door. Claire didn't say a word, didn't even look at me, she was too busy fussing over her lover, sobbing as if he were the victim in all this. The police shoved me into the back of their car, the cold metal of the seat grating against my hands. The events of the past few days raced through my mind like a film stuck on fast forward, each frame cutting me deeper. But it wasn't the handcuffs that hurt. No, it was the image of Claire, her betrayal, her lies, her eagerness to protect this guy over me. Sitting in that police car, everything felt like a blur, a burning, churning haze of disbelief. The officer in the front glanced back at me, his eyes hard but strangely understanding, like he'd seen this scene too many times before. We drove off, and I tried to piece together how things had spiraled so far. It started small. Claire had always been a bit distant, a bit mysterious, traits that once attracted me to her, made me curious. But lately, she'd been more secretive than usual. Late nights at work, a phone she kept practically glued to her hand, and the strange, smug look she'd wear when she thought I wasn't paying attention. At first, I'd chalked it up to stress or maybe a rough patch we were going through. But then, a few days ago, I found something that made me question everything. Claire had left her phone on the counter, forgotten in the shuffle of leaving the house in a hurry. I'll admit, I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. A part of me almost hoped I wouldn't find anything. But when I saw the name, Tony, in her messages, my stomach turned. The messages between them weren't just flirtatious, they were explicit. Every word I read felt like another punch to the gut. By the time I reached the police station, my anger had morphed into something colder, sharper. The officers led me into an interrogation room, and I sat down, staring at the dull, gray walls, trying to calm the storm in my head. I had so many questions, so many emotions clawing at me that I wasn't sure where to even start. But one thing was clear, Claire was not the person I thought she was. "Mr. Harris," a voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I looked up to see the officer from earlier standing in front of me. He was studying me, his face lined with years of experience. "This isn't exactly a rare situation for us," he said slowly, like he was picking his words carefully. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice sounding distant, even to myself. The officer sighed. "Infidelity, violence, broken trust, it's a story as old as time." He folded his arms and leaned against the table. "You've been charged with assault. Tony filed the report on your wife's behalf." My stomach clenched. "She's backing him up?" The words felt thick in my mouth, the reality of her betrayal settling in even deeper. The officer nodded, his expression a mix of sympathy and caution. "Yes, she's testifying that you attacked her boyfriend unprovoked." "Unprovoked?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. She left me for this guy, and now she's protecting him. The officer didn't answer, and I sat back, shaking my head. How had I ended up here, cuffed in a cold room, while Claire defended the very man who'd helped tear our marriage apart? Just days ago, I'd thought we had a life together. Now, I was questioning if any of it had been real. Listen, the officer continued, breaking the silence. You'll have to be careful how you proceed with this. Right now, it's your word against theirs, and legally, it doesn't look great for you. Doesn't look great? I repeated. I'm the one who got cheated on. I'm the one who walked in on this circus. The officer raised his hand, silencing me. If I were you, I'd get a good lawyer. You're going to need one. I sat there, letting his words sink in. A lawyer. The logical part of me knew he was right, that this wasn't a fight I could win by simply confronting Claire or her scumbag boyfriend. But the anger in me didn't want to stop at just a legal battle. By the time they let me go, the entire station was buzzing with murmurs, like they all knew who I was and what I'd just been through. I walked out, feeling the weight of their eyes on me, their judgment. Claire hadn't even bothered to call or check on me. I was on my own. The drive home was quiet, tense, with only the sounds of the road keeping me grounded. As I pulled up to our house, a part of me wondered if she'd be there, waiting for me, if maybe she'd have some excuse or would try to explain herself. But as I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the silence told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't home, and in a way, neither was I. In the middle of the living room was a suitcase, half-packed. Clothes, shoes, and random items were tossed around as if she'd started to leave in a hurry. My heart pounded, realization crashing over me like a wave. She wasn't coming back. Claire had made her choice, and it wasn't me. I felt a rush of emotion I could barely contain, rage, sadness, even relief. It was a strange cocktail that left me standing there, gripping the edge of her suitcase, my knuckles white. I wanted to scream, to throw her things out the window, to burn every reminder of the life we'd built together. But instead, I let go of the suitcase, took a deep breath, and walked out. I knew exactly where she'd be. I drove without hesitation, a sharp sense of purpose guiding me straight to Tony's place. Somehow, I knew Claire would be there, hiding out with him. The anger simmered in my chest, controlled but dangerously close to the surface, each streetlight casting a glow over my knuckles as I gripped the steering wheel. I was done being the one left in the dark, done being the guy on the sidelines. Tony's place was a dingy apartment on the far side of town, the kind of place where cheap thrills thrived behind closed doors. I parked down the street, taking a moment to gather myself, to remind myself I wasn't here to cause another scene, at least, not one that would get me thrown in jail again. But just as I stepped out of the car, I noticed movement near the building's side entrance. A figure I knew all too well slipped out, Claire. She was on her phone, oblivious to everything, her face illuminated by the dim glow of the screen. I watched her for a moment, part of me still in shock at how little remorse she seemed to have. Her laughter drifted toward me, mocking, as if everything was just a game. I felt my pulse hammer in my ears. Claire finally looked up and froze. Our eyes locked, and I saw a flash of guilt, quickly replaced by something colder, like I was a stranger on the street and not her husband. She pulled herself up, her expression turning into that same smug mask I'd seen during our last confrontation. She didn't try to explain, didn't even act surprised. She just walked up to me, crossed her arms, and tilted her head like I was the one who owed her an explanation. Here to throw another tantrum, she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. I swallowed the urge to lash out and kept my tone calm. I just want to know why, Claire. After everything we built together, after all these years, why him? Why throw it all away? She rolled her eyes, exhaling a dramatic sigh as if I were an inconvenience. Honestly, Jack? You're just boring. Predictable. Safe. Tony's got this energy, this thrill you just can't offer. I stared at her, the words settling in, feeling like punches straight to my chest. Boring? Predictable? Was that all I'd ever been to her? My mind raced through memories of the countless sacrifices I'd made, the moments we'd shared, the promises we'd exchanged. And now, here she was, dismissing it all with a shrug. So that's it? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. I was just, convenient. A placeholder? She shrugged, a cruel smile tugging at her lips. You were the perfect stepping stone. You were there when I needed someone to lean on, to pay the bills, to play the nice guy. But I want more. I deserve more. A burning ache filled my chest, but her words only strengthened my resolve. I was done playing the fool. Just then, Tony walked out, his arm in a makeshift sling, casting me a glare filled with hatred and fear. He looked at Claire, then back at me, and I could tell he was sizing up the situation, trying to decide if I'd come here to finish what I'd started. I took a step forward, fixing him with a hard stare. Relax, Tony. I'm not here for another fight. I just want to talk. Clear the air, if you will. But Claire stepped between us, rolling her eyes as if this were all just some tiresome play she was forced to endure. Why don't you just get over it, Jack? We're done. Move on already. And there it was, the final knife, twisted with precision, leaving no doubt about how she really felt. Claire wasn't just leaving me, she was burning every bridge, ensuring there was no possibility of reconciliation. She wanted to hurt me, to leave me shattered and humiliated. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and looked her dead in the eyes. I'll move on, Claire. But you should know that when someone treats people the way you do, it always comes back around. For a moment, she faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a dismissive smirk. She turned, linking arms with Tony as if I were nothing more than a distant memory, unworthy of a second glance. And as I watched her walk away, something inside me shifted, hardening. I took one last look at the two of them, then turned on my heel and walked away without a word. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, one with a reputation for tearing apart cases involving deceit and infidelity. If Claire wanted to throw me away like I was some worn-out possession, would make sure her freedom came with a price. The papers were filed swiftly, and within days, Claire received her notice. She called me, screaming, furious that I'd dared to divorce her, claiming I was the one being unreasonable. But I stayed calm, responding to her vitriol with an icy silence that seemed to unnerve her more than any argument ever could. The days that followed felt like a fog, but one thing was crystal clear: I was done playing the victim in Claire's twisted game. She had wanted excitement, a thrill. Well, she was about to learn that the boring, predictable man she thought she knew had a few surprises of his own. A week later, I was still waiting for the fallout to start. Claire hadn't contacted me again, but I could sense that her silence was just the calm before the storm. In the meantime, I was preparing my next move. There was something Claire didn't know, something she'd overlooked in her haste to abandon everything we'd built together. It wasn't just a lawyer I'd called, I'd also reached out to an investigator, someone with a knack for digging up secrets that people thought were buried too deep to see the light of day. By the time the investigator's report landed on my desk, I felt a dark thrill, the kind that comes from holding a truth that could destroy someone's world. It turns out, Tony wasn't just her lover. He was a fraud, a conman who'd left a trail of debts, scams, and broken promises across multiple states. Claire hadn't found a thrill, she'd latched onto a sinking ship, one that was already taking on water. And in her desperation to burn her bridges with me, she'd set herself up for a disaster she couldn't possibly imagine. Armed with this information, I waited. Claire didn't disappoint. It was late one night when my phone rang, her number flashing on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something inside me knew it was time. I answered, keeping my voice calm, almost indifferent. "Jack?" Her voice was shaky, panicked in a way I'd never heard before. I need to talk to you. Please, it's important." I forced myself to keep my tone even. "Isn't that what you wanted, Claire? To be free of me?" I didn't think there was anything left to talk about. There was a pause, a tremor in her voice that told me I'd hit a nerve. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? Tony isn't who I thought he was. Is that right?" I asked, savoring the words. She took a shaky breath. "Yes. He's in trouble, Jack. He's got people after him, and I'm tangled up in it. I don't know what to do." I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that escaped me. "So now you need me? After throwing me away like garbage? You need my help?" "Please, Jack," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but you're the only one I can turn to. Tony said he'd take care of me, that he'd get us away from everything, but he just used me. And now they're coming for me, too." There was something almost poetic about it, watching her lies and betrayal circle back to bite her. Still, a part of me wanted to see her squirm, to draw out her desperation until she understood exactly how deep she'd cut me. But instead, I kept my voice steady, cool. "Claire, you have no idea how long I've waited to hear you admit that. But I'm done being your safety net. I'm done being the backup plan." I let the silence hang, watching the seconds tick by. She stammered, and I could hear her desperation building. "Jack, please, if you ever loved me, you'll help me. I have nowhere else to go. I'm scared." Her words tugged at something in me, but I reminded myself of all the damage she'd done, of every insult and betrayal. "You'll have to handle it yourself, Claire. You made this mess, and you can clean it up." Before she could respond, I ended the call. The satisfaction that flooded through me was undeniable, but as I sat there, another thought crept into my mind, a nagging feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. 2 days later, I got a call from my investigator again. His voice was tense, laced with urgency. "Jack, you need to be careful. Claire's boyfriend, Tony? He's connected to some very dangerous people, and from what I can gather, they're not too pleased with him." I didn't need a lecture about dangerous people. I'd seen my fair share of trouble in the past, but this felt different. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they're watching her. And since she's your ex, they might assume you're involved, too." For the first time, real concern seeped in. If these people were watching Claire, and by extension, me, then this wasn't just a petty lover's drama anymore, it was a life-and-death situation. But as much as I hated to admit it, I couldn't just let her walk into that kind of danger. She was still tangled up in my life, like a bad dream that wouldn't end. I spent that night awake, thinking through every option, weighing the risks. Part of me wanted to cut and run, to let her face the consequences of her choices. But another part of me, the part that once loved her, couldn't bear the idea of leaving her to fend for herself against people like that. So, the next morning, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I found Tony's last known address, a rundown motel on the edge of town, and drove out there, armed not with anger, but with cold, calculated determination. If I was going to end this, I'd do it on my terms. When I arrived, Tony was there, looking even worse than the last time I'd seen him. His arm was still in a sling, his face bruised and tired. But when he saw me, he didn't look afraid. Instead, he smiled, that cocky smirk that had started all of this. "Well, look who decided to play hero," he sneered. I didn't waste words. "This isn't about you or Claire. This is about getting out of this mess you dragged us into. So here's what's going to happen, you're going to disappear, right now. You're going to leave town and make sure those people forget you ever existed. And if I ever see you again, you'll regret it. Tony's smirk faltered, a flicker of fear in his eyes as he looked at me. And if I don't? I leaned in close, my voice low. Then I make sure every bone you've got left is broken. Don't think I won't. Tony gulped, the confidence draining from his face. Without another word, he backed up, grabbed a bag, and disappeared into the night. It was over. Or so I thought. As I drove back, I couldn't shake the feeling that this chapter of my life was closing, but that a new, unexpected one was about to begin. I'd barely set foot in my house when my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting another plea from Claire or maybe a final warning from Tony. But instead, the number was unknown. Against my better judgment, I answered, pressing the phone to my ear, my grip tightening as a deep, gravelly voice echoed on the other end. Jack Harris, the voice said, almost amused. I hear you've been playing hero. Who is this? I demanded, though I already knew. This was one of the men looking for Tony, and by extension, Claire and me. He chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Doesn't matter. What matters is you've got something that belongs to us, a debt that Tony left behind. Now, he's skipped town, but his baggage remains. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Whatever Tony owes you, it has nothing to do with me. I don't even know the guy. We've got no connection. Oh, I think you're wrong, Mr. Harris, he said, his tone suddenly dark. You're his wife's husband, right? That makes you family. And family pays. I could feel the blood draining from my face. What do you want? Simple, he replied, his tone chillingly casual. You pay what he owes, or she does. And believe me, we've got a much higher price in mind for her. I clenched my teeth. The man had me cornered, and he knew it. But I wasn't about to hand over cash to some faceless thug just because Tony had run off. How much? I asked, trying to buy myself time. Oh, it's not just money anymore. You're going to help us find him. And if you refuse, he left the rest unsaid. I knew exactly what he meant. I hung up without answering, my mind racing. I had no idea where Tony had gone, and I wasn't about to chase after him. But if these people were serious, if they really had Claire in their sights, then my hands were tied. I'd have to warn her, maybe even help her, and the irony of that didn't escape me. After everything she'd put me through, here I was, being dragged back in to save her again. Within minutes, I was back in my car, speeding toward Claire's apartment. When I arrived, her place was dark, eerily quiet. I knocked, then pounded on the door, and finally, she opened it, standing there in an oversized sweatshirt, looking as if she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes widened in surprise as she saw me. Jack, she stammered, her voice a mix of confusion and, was that relief? Pack a bag, Claire, I said, stepping inside. You're coming with me. It's not safe here. Her brows furrowed, and she crossed her arms. Wait, what? You show up here, out of nowhere, after all this. Listen, I cut her off, my voice sharper than intended. Tony's mess didn't disappear with him. He's left a debt, and his creditors aren't exactly willing to forgive and forget. They're coming after you, Claire. And they think they'll get to him through me. Her face paled, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, she looked genuinely afraid. She opened her mouth to argue, but then she seemed to realize I was serious. How do you know they'll come for me? I just got a call, I replied, grimly. They want us both. And believe me, these people don't make empty threats. Without another word, she scrambled to her room, throwing clothes and essentials into a bag, her movements frantic. I could see her hands shaking as she zipped up her suitcase. This was no longer about love or betrayal, this was survival. Whatever history we had, whatever twisted triangle we'd been locked in with Tony, none of it mattered now. We took my car and drove through the night. I'd arranged for a safe house, a cabin I'd borrowed from a friend years ago. It was isolated, deep in the woods, the kind of place where no one would think to look. The drive was quiet, tense. Claire kept glancing at me, as if wanting to say something but holding herself back. When we finally arrived at the cabin, the silence was suffocating. I unloaded the bags and led her inside, the tension between us thick as fog. The weight of everything left unsaid was pressing down on me, but before I could break the silence, she finally spoke. "Jack. I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, unexpected and raw. For the first time since all of this began, she looked vulnerable, like the woman I once knew. "Sorry?" I echoed, bitterness lacing my tone. "Sorry for what, Claire? For cheating? For dragging me into this mess? Or for needing me only when your life's on the line?" She swallowed, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't expect things to go this far. I thought Tony could give me something you couldn't." "And what was that, Claire?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Excitement? A thrill? Was I just not enough for you?" She closed her eyes, taking a shaky breath. "I was selfish. I wanted more. But I was wrong, Jack. I see that now." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. "Only when you've lost everything." She flinched, and for a moment, the weight of our broken past threatened to swallow us both. But I didn't let myself soften. Not this time. "Listen," I said finally, "we're here to lay low, nothing more. Once we're safe, you're on your own." She nodded, not arguing, and disappeared into the bedroom. I stayed on the couch, the silence of the woods pressing in around me. But just as I was starting to let my guard down, a noise outside jolted me back to reality, a faint rustling, too deliberate to be an animal. My instincts kicked in, and I grabbed the baseball bat I'd stashed near the door. I motioned for Claire to stay quiet, gesturing toward the shadows creeping outside the window. Her eyes went wide with fear, but she nodded, pressing herself against the wall. I held my breath, waiting, listening. Then, the cabin door handle rattled, slowly at first, then harder, as if someone was testing it, trying to break in. Without warning, the door burst open, and in the faint moonlight, I saw him, a tall, shadowed figure with cold eyes and a menacing smirk. He stepped inside, holding a knife, his gaze flickering between me and Claire. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with malice. "Looks like Tony's little mess has finally caught up to you too." My grip tightened on the bat, every muscle in my body coiled, ready. I wasn't the same man I'd been before all this time, I'd fight back, no matter what. And as the intruder took a step closer, I swung. The bat connected with a sickening thud, and the man staggered back, cursing as he gripped his shoulder. But he recovered faster than I expected, his knife gleaming in the moonlight as he lunged toward me. I sidestepped, dodging the blade by a hair's breadth. The weight of the situation crashed over me. This wasn't some bar fight. This was survival. "Get out, Claire!" I shouted, but she stood frozen, wide-eyed, rooted to the spot like a deer caught in headlights. The intruder's gaze flicked to her, and a cruel smile tugged at his lips. "Pretty thing, isn't she? Maybe once I'm done here, I'll have a little chat with her." The rage that erupted in me was like nothing I'd felt before. He thought he could take everything, turn my life into ruins, and then walk away like it was nothing. I wouldn't allow it. I swung the bat again, but this time he was ready. He ducked and drove the knife toward me, grazing my side. The pain was sharp and immediate, but adrenaline kept me moving, kept me focused. Suddenly, Claire snapped out of her shock. She grabbed a lamp from the side table and hurled it at him, the glass shattering against his back, staggering him for a split second. It was all the opening I needed. I lunged forward, grabbing his wrist and twisting, forcing the knife from his grasp. It clattered to the floor, and he let out a guttural snarl, throwing a punch with his free hand. But I didn't let go. I tightened my grip, feeling his bones strain under the pressure. Then, just as I thought I had the upper hand, he jerked forward, using his weight to knock me off balance. We crashed to the floor, locked in a brutal struggle, each of us scrambling for control. His fist connected with my jaw, and stars burst in my vision. But as he reared back for another punch, Claire picked up the knife and, with trembling hands, pointed it at him. "Back off," she shouted, her voice fierce but trembling. "Or I swear, I'll use this." The intruder glanced at her, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He knew he was outnumbered. He looked back at me, weighing his options, his expression twisting with frustration and rage. Finally, he backed away, his hands raised mockingly. "All right," he sneered, a wicked glint in his eye. "You win this round. But this isn't over. Tony owes us, and we'll get what's ours. And next time, Jack, I won't be alone." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving us standing in the wreckage of the cabin, panting and shaken. My side throbbed, blood seeping through my shirt, but I barely registered the pain. I turned to Claire, who still held the knife, her hands trembling violently. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of what had just happened settling over us like a shroud. She looked at me, her eyes wide with something between fear and gratitude. I wasn't sure if she was scared of him, or of me. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I took a shaky breath, the anger and adrenaline slowly ebbing, leaving a hollow ache in its place. "Don't thank me yet," I muttered, wincing as I inspected the cut on my side. "This isn't over." As the hours ticked by, we did what we could to patch up my wound and secure the cabin. Claire was uncharacteristically quiet, and I couldn't tell if it was remorse or fear or both. We sat across from each other, both exhausted but too wired to sleep, listening to the forest outside, every rustle making us flinch. And then, as if unable to contain it any longer, she spoke. "I didn't know it would come to this," she murmured, her voice cracking. I didn't think Tony would drag you into this nightmare." I stared at her, hard, and forced myself to say what I'd been holding back since the beginning. "But you didn't care, Claire. You didn't care about anyone but yourself. You only called me when you had no one else. You knew this was a mess, and you didn't even think twice about dragging me down with you." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sympathy this time. I was drained, emptied by her lies, her selfishness, and now, by the very real danger hanging over us like a dark cloud. "I never thought," she choked out, wiping at her tears. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could have both, excitement and security. I was stupid, Jack. I wanted it all." The anger I'd been holding onto softened, if only slightly. It was hard to stay furious at someone so visibly broken. But forgiveness was a long way off. "That's not how life works, Claire," I said, my tone blunt. "And now we're both paying for your decisions." For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at her hands as if searching for answers that wouldn't come. And then, as if struck by some revelation, she looked up. Maybe we can use this to our advantage." I raised an eyebrow. "How?" "Tony didn't just leave a debt behind," she said, her voice trembling with a new determination. "He left information. He used to talk about it all the time, files, contacts, details on every scam he's ever run. He kept everything as insurance, something to hold over anyone he crossed." I felt a spark of hope, faint but growing. "Where?" "His laptop," she said, nodding slowly. "He left it with me, thinking I'd keep it safe while he skipped town. He told me it was worth a fortune if he ever needed to erase his past. I thought he was just boasting, but if we get that laptop, we might have leverage against these people. For the first time, I saw a way out. A chance to end this nightmare without another brawl, another life on the line. Where is it now? I asked, my voice steadier, sharper. It's at my apartment, she replied, wincing as if expecting me to lash out. Without another word, I stood, reaching for the keys. Claire grabbed her jacket, and together, we headed back into the darkness, armed not with weapons but with a plan. This time, I wasn't walking into the fire blind. The drive back to Claire's apartment felt surreal, a tense quiet stretching between us as we each stayed locked in our own thoughts. My mind was racing, dissecting every word Claire had told me about the laptop and Tony's so-called insurance. If it was real, it could be the only thing keeping us alive. And if it wasn't, we just made ourselves bigger targets by heading straight into the fire. As we reached her apartment complex, a feeling of dread settled over me. The shadows seemed longer, the air heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. We parked a few blocks away, and I scanned the area for any signs of Tony's friends. So far, it seemed quiet, too quiet. We crept up the back staircase, taking each step with cautious silence. Claire unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly, peering inside as if her own home were foreign territory. Once we were sure it was empty, we slipped inside, shutting the door softly behind us. "It's in the closet," she whispered, heading toward her bedroom. I followed, heart pounding as I glanced over my shoulder, every small sound making my skin prickle with anxiety. She reached into the back of the closet, rummaging through piles of clothes, then pulled out a small, unassuming black laptop. "Here," she said, handing it to me, her hands shaking. I took it carefully, weighing it like it held our fate. It was surprisingly light, almost underwhelming, and yet I could sense its power. "Let's go," I whispered, ready to make a break for the door. But then, just as we turned, the lights in the hallway flickered, footsteps echoing down the corridor. I froze, every instinct on high alert. Claire's face paled as she heard it too, her hand reaching instinctively for mine. The footsteps stopped outside her door. I held my breath, gripping the laptop tight, adrenaline flooding my veins. Whoever was out there wasn't just here by chance, they'd come for us. "Claire," a voice called out, smooth, menacing, with a familiarity that sent a chill down my spine. "Open the door. We need to have a little chat." Claire's eyes widened in terror. She whispered, "That's Leo. Tony's main contact." I motioned for her to back up, signaling her to stay quiet. I glanced around, searching for another way out, but the only escape was the narrow window in her bedroom. As Leo's footsteps came closer, the doorknob began to turn. We didn't have time. In one swift motion, I cracked open the window and gestured for Claire to go first. She climbed out, her eyes wide with fear as she scrambled down the fire escape. I slid the laptop under my jacket and followed, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Just as I reached the window, I heard the apartment door swing open, Leo's voice drifting through the air like poison. "Where do you think you're going?" he sneered, spotting me halfway out the window. Without thinking, I jumped down the last few steps, landing hard but steady, grabbing Claire's hand as we sprinted toward the car. Leo's footsteps thundered above us, the fire escape rattling as he gave chase. We bolted across the parking lot, our breath ragged, every step pounding with urgency. Just as we reached the car, Leo's voice cut through the darkness. "You think you can outrun me, Jack? You think that laptop's going to save you?" He laughed, a cold, mocking sound. Tony had the same idea, and look where it got him. Ignoring him, I shoved Claire into the passenger seat, jumped into the driver's seat, and fired up the engine. Leo was coming up fast, a flash of anger and menace in his eyes. I slammed on the gas, tires screeching as we sped out of the parking lot, leaving him behind in a cloud of dust. But even as the distance between us grew, I knew this wasn't over. He'd follow, and he'd keep following until he had what he wanted. We drove in silence for miles, only stopping when we reached a remote motel on the outskirts of town. I parked the car, and we headed inside, checking in under fake names, paying in cash. The manager barely looked at us, just handed over a key and pointed down a dimly lit hallway. Once inside, I locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding since the apartment. Claire slumped onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. "This is all my fault," she whispered. "I was so blind, so reckless." I stared at her, the anger I'd held onto for so long now twisted with pity. "Maybe," I replied quietly. "But right now, all that matters is surviving this." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "You could leave, you know. You could take that laptop, turn it in, and walk away. This isn't your fight." I held up the laptop, feeling its weight again, the responsibility it carried. "You think they'd just let you go, Claire? That they wouldn't come after me, after you, after everyone we know?" A tear slid down her cheek, and for the first time, I saw real regret in her eyes. "I never meant for you to get hurt. Not like this." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. "Hurt? Claire, you shattered my life. But right now, none of that matters. If this laptop has what we need to make these people back off, then maybe, just maybe, we have a chance." Without another word, I opened the laptop and powered it on, praying Tony's so-called insurance wasn't another lie. The screen blinked to life, prompting for a password. I looked at Claire, hoping she might know it. "Try CashCow23, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I typed it in, and the screen unlocked, revealing a desktop littered with files and folders, names I didn't recognize but that clearly spelled out Tony's twisted trail of fraud and deceit. It was all there: offshore accounts, blackmail files, connections to everyone from minor criminals to high-level players. As I scrolled through the files, a new plan started to form. We could use this. We could use every dirty little secret Tony had left behind to shield ourselves from Leo and his men. I looked over at Claire, a steely determination settling over me. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice hard, "we're going to make a deal. We'll give them just enough of this information to get them off our backs, for good." She nodded, her expression unreadable, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of control, a sense that maybe, just maybe, we'd make it out of this alive. But deep down, I knew that by tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I spent hours combing through Tony's files, searching for anything that would give us leverage. Claire watched, her face a mix of guilt and nervous anticipation. This laptop held everything: names, transactions, photos, proof of deals that could put people away for years. We had gold in our hands, but it was dangerous gold, the kind that could backfire if handled wrong. I had one shot to use this information to get Leo and his crew off our backs forever. Just before noon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number: "Meet at the old factory at 2 p.m. Alone. Bring the laptop, or we find her." Short and direct. They knew where we were, and they weren't playing games. I looked over at Claire, my mind spinning with a new plan. "Stay here. I'm going to finish this." She grabbed my arm, eyes wide. "Jack, don't go alone. Leo doesn't do deals, he'll kill you once he has what he wants." But I shook her off gently, giving her a look I hoped said more than words could. "Trust me, Claire. This ends today." I drove out to the old factory, a crumbling skeleton of concrete and steel that loomed against the sky like a graveyard monument. Leo was waiting for me, along with two goons who looked like they'd walked straight out of a bad crime movie. Their eyes followed me as I approached, the laptop tucked under my arm. Leo's smirk was razor-sharp. "You actually came. With the laptop, I assume?" I held it up, keeping my face neutral. "It's all here. But we make a trade. This laptop, in exchange for leaving us alone, permanently." Leo laughed, low and mocking. "You think I need your terms? Once I've got that laptop, what's stopping me from taking you out right here?" I expected him to say that. That's why I'd come prepared. "Because," I said, my voice steady, "I've already sent the files to someone who will release them if I don't check in by midnight. Every contact, every deal, every dirty secret Tony left behind. You kill me, and your whole operation goes down." His face darkened, his confidence slipping just a little. I knew I'd struck a nerve. "And who would that be?" he sneered, eyes narrowing. "That's my insurance," I replied coolly, hoping he couldn't see the bluff beneath my calm exterior. "But trust me, if I don't make it back, you won't last the week." Leo hesitated, and I could feel the tension in the air. His goons shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the risk. Finally, after a tense silence, he nodded. "All right, you've got a deal. The laptop, and we're done with you." I handed over the laptop, every instinct screaming at me to watch my back. As Leo took it, he nodded to his men, and they turned to leave. For a moment, I thought I'd won. I thought I'd actually managed to pull it off. But just as he started to walk away, Leo turned, eyes flashing with a deadly glint. "One more thing, Jack. A little insurance of my own." Before I could react, he pulled out a gun and fired. The shot rang out, tearing through the silence, and I felt a hot, searing pain in my side. I staggered, clutching my wound, my vision blurring as I dropped to one knee. Leo smirked, lowering the gun. "Thanks for the files. Now you and Claire can finally be together, in hell." He walked away, his footsteps echoing as I clutched my side, fighting the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. I could barely make out the sound of a car driving off, leaving me alone, bleeding out in the empty factory. But then, just as my vision started to fade, I heard another sound, footsteps, soft and careful. I struggled to keep my eyes open, and through the haze, I saw Claire. She was there, kneeling beside me, her face a mix of fear and determination. "Jack," she whispered, pressing her hands against my wound to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me. Don't you dare leave me here alone." I managed a weak smile, the irony of it all hitting me hard. Here I was, dying to save the woman who'd betrayed me, the same woman who dragged me into this mess. But as she pressed down harder, her hands shaking, I saw something else, a kind of desperation that I hadn't seen before. Maybe she did care, in her own broken way. "Claire," I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. Take the phone, the files." She nodded, reaching into my pocket for the backup USB I'd stashed, the real insurance plan I'd made just in case Leo didn't keep his word. "You're going to make it," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "We're going to get out of this, together." The last thing I saw before everything went dark was her face, blurred but filled with something I could only hope was real. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed, the steady beep of machines the first thing I registered. My side throbbed, but I was alive. Claire was there, sitting beside me, clutching the USB drive in her hand, her eyes red and exhausted. "You saved me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I took a shaky breath, the weight of everything finally crashing down. "Only because I didn't want your mess to take me down, too." She laughed, a bitter, shaky sound, and nodded. "Fair enough." Over the next few days, we took the files to the authorities, cutting a deal with people who had more interest in putting criminals away than dealing with us. Leo's operation was blown open, and he was taken down, along with Tony's entire network. I heard whispers that Leo had put a price on my head, but he was locked up too tightly to be a real threat now. Claire and I parted ways shortly after. There were no more apologies, no promises to stay in touch. We'd been through too much, and the weight of her betrayal was too heavy to forgive. But as I walked away from her for the last time, I felt a strange kind of peace. She was free to live her life, and I was finally free to rebuild mine, without her lies, without the shadow of her mistakes hanging over me. I took one last look at her, the woman who'd both wrecked and saved my life, then turned and walked away, my future finally my own again. Bye for now.